Welcome to the Road to the Ryder Cup, hosted by Dr. Jeff Poplarski and my dad, PGA golf professional Frank Darby. Let's go USA.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Road to the Ryder Cup. I'm here with Dr. Jeff Poplarski, the Performance and Wellness Director for the United States Golf Association. He's had a couple of a great event last week, and this is going to be a pretty busy month for him as well. But my name is Frank Darby. I'm a PGA member in the Metropolitan section. I'm the host of On Course on SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio. So I'm going to throw it to probably one of my favorite parts of this podcast is Dr. Jeff giving us all of these background things and information and how long it's going to be before the Ryder Cup comes. So, Jeff, give us some info.
Yeah, some updates. We have 111 days to the 2025 Ryder Cup. So much anticipation for this one. It's going to be a great event. As you know, I'm on the ground at Bethpage every week, and I'm just seeing some great things happening there. On hole number 15, the dogleg left, they're starting to build a corporate hospitality village there. There's a whole village going up on hole 15 and 16. There's a vendor compound that they established that has a whole bunch of activity going through there. So every day I go there, I see different things. Luke Donald was at Bethpage a couple of weeks ago also. He actually went to a local elementary school and did a talk to the kids and gave out complimentary tickets to the practice round on Tuesday at Bethpage Black for the Ryder Cup, which was pretty amazing. Just a lineup so our viewers know exactly what's going to take place during the Ryder Cup. On Tuesday, it's going to be a practice round, September 23rd. Wednesday, the 24th, is going to be a practice day and celebrity matches. We are hearing that there's going to be a lot of New York athletes playing in that celebrity match. On Thursday, September 25th, is going to be practice day and the Junior Ryder Cup matches, which is going to be awesome. Friday, the 26th, 27th, and 28th is going to be obviously the Ryder Cup. So a little rundown of the events. Tunnel to Towers is our sponsor. Last Sunday, June 1st, they had the stair climb, climbing up 104 flights on One World Trade Center. I heard it was a great success. And the run is on September 28th, which ironically is also the last day of the Ryder Cup. And then, Frank, before I turn it back to you, I really want to congratulate you having two players play in the 125th U.S. Open at Oakmont. Keegan Bradley, obviously the team captain for USA, and also Ryan McCormick. So congratulations to Frank, and back to you.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Thanks for that. And, go Johnnies. It's been a pretty good year with basketball and golf for us as well. But hey, listen, I co-host a show on SiriusXM on Sunday mornings, 10 o'clock with Brian Kroll. And the show that comes on after us is called The Scorecard with a good friend of mine, Dave Marr. So he comes on my show. We go on his show. Hey, one of my favorite guys to listen to. Dave, thank you for coming onto the Road to the Ryder Cup.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for getting me on the road. Ryder Cup is such an important event as far as the overall game of golf is concerned. But as far as the Marr family is concerned, it was my dad's greatest probably playing achievement that he got a chance to play on the Ryder Cup team after winning the PGA Championship at 65. Played for one of his childhood idols and became a mentor, Byron Nelson, and played 4 matches with his surrogate big brother out on tour, Arnold Palmer. So after that, he became captain in 81, and that was the greatest honor he was ever given. And Ryder Cup has always meant something very special to him and to us, even back before the days of Kiowa Island, when everyone started to really pay closer attention to the Ryder Cup. It was very, very, very meaningful to those players and those people in the game of golf who wanted to represent the game and our country to the utmost on the world stage.
Yeah, Dave Marr has grown up in the New York area. And Dave, it's so interesting doing a lot of the background on the Ryder Cup and, your family who've been, your grandfather and your dad were golf professionals, which is absolutely unbelievable and famous as well. And your dad worked at Wingfoot for the legendary Claude Harmon. Can you tell us what it was like growing up in that environment?
It's New York. And people who don't or haven't lived here don't really fully understand just the power of the New York metropolitan area, what it means to someone who's growing up. Just for a little background, again, my grandfather, PGA professional, but he passed away when my dad was only 14 years old. They were down in Texas. My dad was basically raised by the southern Texas section of the PGA of America. The golf professionals there made sure that my grandmother had enough to feed the family. Two of his siblings had to go and live with relatives in Louisiana. It was some tough times in the 40s and early 1950s. And then he befriended a number of players, including Tommy Bolt. Tommy was going and taking his Cadillac from Houston to Palm Beach for the wintertime. And he said to my dad, drive my car. When you get there, we'll find you an assistant's job down in Florida. So he showed up, and Tommy's having dinner with Claude Harmon. At that point, it doesn't get much more legendary than a PGA professional like Claude Harmon. He had won the Masters tournament about less than 10 years prior, probably about 5 years prior at that point, 1948. And so Dad ended up holding the door for Mrs. Harmon, Alice Harmon, who is one of the greatest ladies in the game. We hear a lot about Winnie Palmer, a lot about Barbara Nicholas, Vivian Burway player, and so many great wives and others who have influence, whether it's Judy Bell from the USGA, so many others, Susie Whaley from the PGA of America. But she really had a great impact on all of those assistant professionals at Wingfoot that would go on to become professionals and major champions. So as she's walking in the door, as Dad's holding the door, she turns to Claude and says, sit the boy next to me. Now, my dad looked like he's about 15 at the time, but he was 18, 19 actually, and you had to be 18 to be hired at Wingfoot. Alice, at the end of the dinner, said to Claude, you got to hire him and bring him up to Wingfoot. Claude said, he looks like he's 15 years old. There's no way the membership will allow me to. And she put her foot down, said, you got to hire this kid. He needs a break. He needs influence. He's intellectually curious. He'll fit in well at Wingfoot with the membership, with the assistant professionals, with you, with the whole family. Claude went to Dad and said, you have to tell the members you're 20 years old, because if you say you're 19, that's 1 year away from 18. They'll think you're lying. No one lies 3 years more than their age. So you say that you're 20 years old, we'll hire you. So they hired him. Usually it was a 1 year thing as an assistant for Claude because he was so good. I mean, really, his coaching tree of assistants and PGA head professionals to go on and play and become head professionals is maybe like no other in the history of the game. Bob Ford, maybe, people along those lines. In any case, Dad stayed for a couple of years. He lived at the golf club, Wingfoot. It's now a supply closet, the room he used to sleep in. And he would go with some members and members' sons sometimes into the city and sort of get a sense of what the big city was like. And he really became who he would become at Wingfoot Golf Club. Winter times, Claude kept him and they went down to Seminole together. He got to be great pals with Ben Hogan and saw his game against some of the greatest in the game could maybe stand up. So he went out and tried the PGA Tour. But more important than that, because Dad was much better known, though he had 4 wins and a major, as a personality in the game, a raconteur, storyteller, an analyst, a kind person who could tell you what was going on in the game in a very direct but easy to listen to manner. He learned all that from his time up at Wingfoot and in New York City. Once he became a professional, won the PGA Championship, he was spending time with Arnold out on the golf tour, but Mickey Mantle would come over for dinner. Maybe his closest friend was Frank Gifford, Sinatra out on the tour when he got to the West Coast. I mean, people loved the city boy golfer with the Texas accent. And Dad loved being someone who enjoyed more than just beating balls, but playing golf against the best in the world and enjoying life along the way.
Awesome. Great stories, Dave.
Yeah.
Just for clarification, so you are Dave Marr III, and Dad was Dave Marr Jr. 1965, your father's on the Ryder Cup team at Royal Birkdale. Then he captains in 1981. I just had a question. Do you have any memorabilia from your dad from those 2 Ryder Cup? Any trinkets or anything like that? And were you at the 1981 Ryder Cup?
Doc, come on now. Do I have any trinkets? You clearly don't know me very well. I got trinkets, like a room full of trinkets, especially from 81. 65 is a little more difficult. 81, they had some nice flags and divot repair tools and things along those lines. And I am that guy who goes on eBay and auctions and looks around for the 65 PGA, 65 Ryder Cup. and 81 Ryder Cup as well. So let's just say, and if anyone is listening in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and want to go check with the registrar's office at Bucknell University, they will know that my GPA and my, let's just say, effort level in college was more geared towards weekends than it was to weekdays and classes. So I was not allowed to accompany my dad to the Ryder Cup during school days, school hours. In 1981, I was a junior at Bucknell. P.S. Greatest place on the planet from my perspective. But in any case, I did not go to the Ryder Cup. It was so important to Dad, but again, I was kind of on the razor's edge with the student affairs dean, etc. So I needed to focus on my studies. However often I would be in class, as many times as I could get there, I needed to. So I wasn't there for that. And 65, I was 3 years old. I remember my dad winning the PGA Championship, just about to turn 4. But I don't remember much about the Ryder Cup because it wasn't broadcast. The 81 Ryder Cup was broadcast on tape delay. It was overseas, so it wasn't one that was broadcast in the States. PGA of America and ABC's deal for the Ryder Cup was for home Ryder Cups. It was just way too expensive to produce a broadcast for the away Ryder Cups. It was maybe the greatest team, it was the greatest team of all time. 9 major champions, 9 Hall of Fame members eventually, 11 major championship winners at the end of the day. The only guy not to win a major on the team was one of the best guys on the team, won double-digit PGA Tour events, and that was Bruce Lipke. So remember a lot about what it meant to Dad, but wasn't actually there. My grandmother was there in 81, and she would go out and walk 36 holes a day, watch a couple of matches, and Trevino nicknamed her Captain Mom because she was maybe the first assistant captain in the history of the Ryder Cup, my grandmother.
You know, Jeff, I love talking with Dave about everything because he had to buy another house just to put all his trinkets and everything in out there. And, I look at Dave as like the historian now, he knows, and just must have been something growing up there with your dad and all the people just coming in and out of your lives, Dave. What would it have been like, at a kitchen table?
Well, it was a very interesting kitchen table because Dad was a rare person early on. I'm not sure Jack would acknowledge now the real division between the Jack followers and the Arnold followers. It was really, you were one or the other. But Dad loved the game so much, understood each of the things that they're each so wonderful about. Arnold being the uncle everyone and great pal everyone wanted to have, and Jack being such an unbelievably decent human being, always doing or trying to do the right thing. He was able to straddle that line. So I got to be pals or have uncles, guys changing my diapers that were Jack and Arnold and so many others on the PGA Tour because when he got to broadcasting, Dad's style of broadcasting, and I don't want to insult any broadcasters nowadays, if you're listening, his whole concept was you broadcast the game the way you play the game, with etiquette, with sportsmanship. You don't need to jigger your change in someone's back swing or trash talk or anything along those lines. He'll let you know when a guy's hit a bad shot. You have to say how terrible it is, this, that, and the other. And so he was respected because anyone who played the game understood by listening to Dad when a shot was terrible. But Dad didn't have to say it was terrible. So there were those who played the game that loved Dad, and pretty much it was universal. There were those outside of the game that wanted him to be a little more controversial. There was a columnist who did the television reviews for USA Today. His name was Rudy Marsky, and he would always just give Dad grief because Dad wasn't sharp enough with the players. That's not the way Dad played. That's not the way this game is played either, I don't think. And that's not the way he commentated. He understood what was going on when you listen to what Dad had to say. And I think others in the media also like that. He and Dan Jenkins, possibly because they're both Texans, they both had a great sense of humor, were best of friends. So whether it was Dave Anderson, whether it was, any of the great writers were always a resource for me, always around telling stories with Dad. So I'd pick up on all those stories. I didn't have to be part of the conversation, but I had the great benefit of having some of the greatest players, greatest minds, greatest storytellers, greatest writers, and greatest broadcasters, Jim McKay and Jack Whitaker, two of Dad's greatest pals, and they did it right. So I was able to see that my entire life, courtesy of my father.
Great stories there. Speaking of Arnold, so we have the U.S. Open at Oakmont. I'm actually getting in the car right after this interview and going to drive 7 hours to Pittsburgh. But Arnold, played on 6 Ryder Cup teams. He captained the 63 team. He's the last captain to actually play. I just had a couple of thoughts. Maybe one good story about Arnold and your dad. I know they were tight. And what do you think of Keegan Bradley potentially being a playing captain at 2025 at Bethpage?
I'll start with Keegan. I hope he qualifies or picks himself to play. I hope he's one of the 12 best players to help the team. At that point, I hope he kind of laterals captain responsibilities, because as great as an honor as it is, the player has to be ready to play. And from my perspective, if he does qualify to play and be a playing captain and decides to be on the team, or takes the advice of the players and assistant captains to be a member of the playing team, they should give him the captaincy in 2027 as well. As far as Arnold's concerned, I'm going to have to narrow him down because there are about 1 million of them. But my favorite is my dad at his lowest point. He wins the PGA Championship. He gets to go represent his country at the Ryder Cup. And it was one of the most special moments in his entire life. So one of the greatest moments of his life, he ends up going out to the first tee. They're the second group off, playing alternate shot. And Dad is overcome. The national anthem starts playing. The one you put your hand over your heart at football games or the Olympics. And now they're playing it for my dad on the first tee in a foreign country. Forget it. The Texas boy can't do anything. They lose 6-5 to Peter Allis. And Dad is at lunch, can't decide whether he's going to, throw up his lunch or just get on the next flight home. He is totally crestfallen. And again, his Ryder Cup captain is Byron Nelson, greatest Texas gentleman of all time, one of the great Mount Rushmore golfers of all time. He comes up to the lunch table, and Dad's sitting there with Arnold, his big brother, who he's let down. So he's let down his hero. He's let down his big brother. He's let down his team. He's let down his family. He's let down his country. It's the worst moment of his life. Byron comes up to the table and says to Arnold, "Hey, Arnold, I wanted to talk to you about your partner for the afternoon." Arnold's halfway through his sandwich. He's played Ryder Cup before. He knows what's going on. He knows how terrified Dad is. He looks up at Byron. He says, "I got my partner right here." And Dad is stunned and looks over at Byron. Byron winks at Dad and looks over at Arnold and says, "I was hoping you'd say that," and walks away. And Dad's thinking to himself, I guess it's not as bad as I thought it was. Arnold knew what Dad needed in that moment to lift Dad and make him what he needed to be for the rest of the Ryder Cup matches. They had 5 matches left. They played 6 matches that year. He and Arnold won 2 of the next 3 matches, and Dad won both of his singles, all because Arnold Palmer gave him a hand at a time when Arnold really could have said, "Hey, man, we just lost worse than I've ever lost before. And it's because of you." He could have said that. That's not what Arnold Palmer did ever. And I watched him for 60 years take care of people the way he took care of my dad. And that was probably the most important moment for my dad. Arnold knew it. Arnold did the right thing.
Yeah, fantastic story. We're going to go to commercial break. Our sponsor is the Tunnel to Towers. You could go on T2T.org and make as little as $11 a month donation to assist our American heroes. So let's hear from the Tunnel to Towers.
We just had a plane crash into Level 4 of the World Trade Center.
I get a phone call by a firefighter. He said, "Nobody's coming home." And I said, "I think that we need to do something to honor, what Stephen did and what everybody else did that day." And we pieced everything that he ran through the tunnel and stuff. We figured that's what he did, tunnel to towers. He ran through the tunnel to the towers where he gave up his life. We, as Americans, better be there to take care of these families that live behind. That's why we make sure as a foundation that we take care of those Gold Star families and fallen first responder families that have young children left behind.
Hey, welcome back to the Road to the Ryder Cup. We've got a great guest today. We've had a couple of phenomenal stories, and we're looking forward to a couple more. So Dave, let me just ask you a little bit about. Um, I really like doing the research on all the old Ryder Cup scenarios. And boy, I tell you what, anytime Seve Ballesteros was involved in anything, there seemed like there was some sort of, gamesmanship going on and different things. And can you just tell me a little bit about the confrontation that he had with Raymond Floyd?
Wow.
Did,
Well, it wasn't just Raymond though. It was so many others as far as Seve's concerned, and he was always pushing the envelope. Raymond would never ever allow that to happen. I want to backtrack one quick second because while you talk about the confrontation, there was no confrontation in 1979. The first time the Europeans came over and played against the Americans as a part of the Ryder Cup team. And it was one where everyone was waiting to see what was going to happen as far as that confrontation, Seve on the team. And it was not yet a Bernhard Langer team. He wasn't on that team. 81 was the first time Bernhard was on it. But it was the first team for a real American hero, and that is Larry Nelson. Larry was a man who fought for the USA in Vietnam. He was point man in a reconnaissance team. So he was the deepest behind enemy lines that you can be for the U.S. forces and hadn't yet played the game of golf. He came back from doing that, joined the tour 2 years later, and ended up that first year, 1979, beating Seve Ballesteros 4 times that year, 3 times in team play with his partner, Lanny Watkins. Lanny wanted him so bad in singles, but Larry Nelson drew him. And I'm guaranteeing you that was when Seve thought to himself, okay, now I'm gonna show that it was who I am, basically what's going on, and did not end up going well as far as Seve was concerned for that particular interaction. Again, he lost 4 times to Larry Nelson, did not come back in 1981. He had interactions and controversies with Raymond, with Paul Azinger. He was always doing, even players on his own team. He and Bernhard Langer went kind of at it one time when he was captaining in 1987, him wanting Bernhard to try and take it out over the water from between the trees, and Bernhard saying, I'm going to take it through this, a tiny little window about like as big as one pane of glass. He wanted to take it into the fairway, which is what Bernhard ended up doing, and making his birdie the conventional way, the conservative way. He was a fun guy to watch play, but not a fun guy to play against.
Dave, I know you're a member of Shinnecock Hills, and Shinnecock played a pivotal role of having a Ryder Cup at Bethpage because after 2009, the state system was looking to go back to the USGA and have a US Open again at Bethpage. And the USGA decided to give that open date, which I believe was 2018, to Shinnecock. And then Bethpage, then the PGA of America stepped in and had a championship and the Ryder Cup. Any thoughts on that? And as a member, were you involved with any discussions at all with the PGA of America and USGA about that whole scenario?
I'm not involved at all. Shinnecock is a wonderful venue. I think their involvement with the USGA, I mean, it dates back to the origination of the USGA, one of the 5 founding member clubs. I don't have to say it to you, but I think their real allegiance to USGA championships would have been something that would have been kind of difficult to overcome and have a Ryder Cup out there. It's an event, frankly, I think most venues would love to have. I'm not sure that quite fits the Hamptons and Shinnecock. I think it's much better suited to Bethpage, which I think, frankly, I need to go all the way back to David Fay from the USGA, who was very instrumental in trying to get the first Bethpage Ryder Cup. He stopped me at one point at a USGA event and said, I'm doing this for guys like your dad who grew up at municipal golf courses. And I can't believe that we're going to have this event. It was before the first 2002 Bethpage US Open. And I think that really put Bethpage on the map as a quality championship course. Anything that Tillinghast does, you got to think there's quality there to begin with. But I was not involved at all in any conversations about Ryder Cup moving further east to Shinnecock or about that open date going to Shinnecock, but it made sense in the rotation in terms of how quickly the U.S. Open came back to Shinnecock. It's back next year as well, and then again, I believe it's 36. The USGA's both of their Open championships, the men and women, back-to-back weeks at Shinnecock. Then, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Hey, Dave, if we, Dave is very close with Bernard Langer. We talk about him all the time on our Sirius shows. I'm a big fan of Bernard Langer. Can we talk a little bit about the 91 Ryder Cup, the war at the shore? I mean, do you think, the only reason why I'm bringing it up is, do you think we're going to have a war here at Bethpage as well?
I don't know, Brad. I'm a little worried. It's an opportunity for the wonderful sports fans of New York to show how great they are in terms of understanding how to cheer and how to root. Doesn't have to be the loudest. Do it in a golf manner. Unfortunately, I think there are a couple of things. I was shaking my head when Doc was talking earlier about how the European captain, Luke Donald, showed up, went to a nearby elementary school. And it reminded me of Bernhard, who back in the Ryder Cup in Detroit, where they actually tied my dad's record for greatest victory overseas in terms of points. And the European team just crushed. It was when Tiger and Phil played together on the same team. Hal Sutton was the captain of the U.S. team. But Bernhard said, go out there and sign every autograph that they ask for. You become their team, because the U.S. team had gotten kind of reserved and maybe a little too big for their britches. And the European team went out there and became the favorites. They were giving away gloves and all practice rounds and all that. And there was a strict no autograph policy for the American team. Bernhard understood what that crowd would mean. I get the partisanship of the crowd, especially nowadays. It seems to be shifting in maybe a little bit of an uglier way, too ugly from my perspective. But you also have the Americans now getting paid. You have Luke Donald, who's an American educated and married to an American woman, understands the psyche of the American fan, doing all the right things before the matches. So he may defuse some of that. And I hope the PGA of America make sure that those who are on site are behaving more in a manner of how the Masters patrons watch the Masters tournament than how the Waste Management Phoenix Open tournament watches theirs. So I think that the partisanship in the past of the Ryder Cup, if that can get tamped down to some degree and cheer in an appropriate golf manner for this year's Ryder Cup, that would be my dream. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to get a little bit, I think there'll be times when it gets out of hand, and that'll be sad.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. That's been discussed on other shows too. And a lot of security. I happen to be chairing a committee called Walking Marshals, where we have 75 people that are actually going to walk inside the ropes with the players, what state police, what PGA representatives. So the PGA is actually looking at that very closely. I think they're going to do a good job. New Yorkers certainly respect good play, and we'll see how it all plays out. But Dave, I had a question for you. You have a 17-year career, with the Golf Channel, with the PGA Tour Champions. You're a play-by-play announcer, tower announcer, interviewer. I had two questions related to that. One is, what was your favorite senior event? And two, I know what your dad in the summers used to work as a spotter for ABC, making $25 a day. So I'd like to hear about your favorite event, senior event, and that story about being a spotter for $25 in the 70s.
I got converted to $25 a day, and I was the richest kid in town in 1978 after that U.S. Open at Cherry Hills. So Dad was not a dumb guy, but Dad would take us. We'd visit with him during the summertime, but typically it was when he was on the road, PGA Championship, U.S. Open. Made sure we stayed away from Augusta till we were old enough to appreciate it the right way. Open Championship. And when we're there, for the first couple of times we would visit, we'd be at a venue that usually had a couple of courses, whether it be Oakland Hills, etc. And the Jenkins kids were about our age. And as much as I talked about the Dan Jenkins, Dave Marr friendship, the Jenkins kids and the Marr kids, when you put them together, it was like nitro and glycerin. We would go play football on the other fairways, things you're not supposed to do, but we didn't pay a lot of attention to what was going on at the major. Dad decided if we're going to be out there, he's going to give us the opportunity to go work for ABC Sports. First, mine was an unpaid runner going getting cokes for those in the trucks. It started at the 74 U.S. Open. I was 12 at Wingfoot. And then first time I got paid, I had to lie. I was 16 and had to say I was 18 for 2 years with ABC. And I was a scorer. I would sit there on a hole and call in and say, okay, Nicholas 3, Darby 2, Palmer 6. You can thank me for that score rundown later, Frank.
Thank you, Dave.
But so I got $25 a day, 4 days. I was there the entire day. You know how long a USGA championship goes. So I'm there from crack of dawn till everyone comes home in the afternoon. 7th hole at Cherry Hills, par 3. That's where I started. And then I got promoted to 35 a day to do spotting in 1980. And then I got hired full time as soon as I got out of school. So it was awesome. Great education. PGA Tour champions. And let me just break it down, because anytime you're going to that tour and you go from place to place and see how the greatest names in the game who are still out there representing the game being played in a way and represented in a way it should be, and they're celebrated by the local fans the way they are, almost any stop on PGA Tour champions was a real pleasure to be associated with. To start the year at the Four Seasons Hualalai on the Big Island of Hawaii, to me it was a special thing, because they really share the whole Hawaiian culture, Polynesian manner of trying to celebrate your visitors and trying to take care of anyone who comes there. And Mitsubishi Electric and the Four Seasons did a spectacular job of that. I'm giving you 3 different events because each one has its own thing. The Insperity Invitational was a regular tour event that was so well put together, so well run, that the tour allowed them to become an invitational, do away with their Tuesday open qualifying, etc., and really honor those players in the game that have done something special. They've got a week-long set of dinners and gatherings where they celebrate. They've got the greats of the game that come play. Jack Arnold's played there, Trevino. 20 people show up, men and women. Nancy Lopez. It's a wonderful, wonderful week in the game. And then I'm going to pick one that, might sound strange. Why am I not picking the Tradition Tournament, which I ran for a bit, which celebrates the tradition of winning major championships? The Senior PGA Championship is the oldest championship in the game, and one that's terrific. But the Dick's Sporting Goods Open, to me, right outside of Binghamton in Enjoy, New York, used to be where they would have the BC Open, is a place where the entire town and surrounding town show up to support the game. They've got a great Friday concert. Maroon 5 is coming in. It's just, to me, one of the last holdovers of how people used to enjoy the game. The greatest players and greatest names in the game would come to town, interact with those people in the community, and the community would show up en masse to cheer them on and show their appreciation for those people coming, entertaining in their community, and ultimately winning their tournament. To me, it's as old school gets, as decent and as grassroots as golf is meant to be, and one of my favorite places to go. It's in about 3 weeks from now.
Yeah. Hey, Dave. So we gotta talk about one more thing from my end of it right here, and it's the Dave Marr Jr. Award. Okay, and it was started in 1999 to exemplify the traits that your dad lived by: sportsmanship, honesty, integrity, and passion for the game. Now, I think actually it's got to be Dave Marr III needs to be added to that list as well, because you fit in perfectly, just like your dad does, and everything that you do as well. But Dave, the winners of these awards it's unbelievable. It's just a who's who of all phenomenal players between Watson, Crenshaw, Arnold, Jack, and Barbara Nicholas. Johnny Miller, Marco Mira won in 2024, and recently Hale Irwin in 2025. Tell us a little bit about the award.
Coach, you're trying to make me emotional here. Is that what we're trying to do? Because
yeah, it's yes.
Dr. Jeff, you may need to look after my wellness here in just a second, my mental well-being. But I have to tell you, I've got the indebtedness that me and my family feel towards the man who started the award, Brian Noggle, who runs that Insperity Invitational. It's, again, one of those things they do throughout the week. They had a concert with Earth, Wind, and Fire early in the week. They have the player dinner where Jack Arnold, and not Arnold anymore, but it was Jack, Annika, Tom Watson, Lee Trevino, they get up and tell stories. And they have the Dave Marr Award, which is kind of the good guy award, integrity, sportsmanship, a passion for the game, and those names that you mentioned. And I just want to point out Jack and Barbara were two different years. Barbara got her own award. She wasn't in there as a couple. She's because she's so meaningful to the game. You throw in there as well, Beatrix and Saharias and Nancy Lopez. And Bernhard won as well. Nick Price, who's one of the great people in the game. It was started by Brian to try and honor people because he and Dad were very close. He was probably the son my dad wanted to have. He wanted to honor people who gave him the same feeling that Dad did. They cared so much about the game and cared about doing it right and cared about people. That they've done this now for 30 years that Dad's been gone, almost 30 years. And Paul Sarvati, who runs Insperity, it's an expensive deal to have these nighttime parties. And he understands the value of crediting people for doing something well and doing it the right way. There's something positive about that. There's a reward to that might not come back to hit the bottom line, but it means something overall to your tournament. It's a special place because they do those sorts of things. And frankly, that award has a number of names on it. If you take a look at it, I appreciate you saying my name should be on that award, but only ever on the front as my father's son, because those names are just too much of why we all love this game to begin with. Watching the way Arnold used to go out, smile, hitch his pants, and just run after whatever title he could, watching the cool manner in which Jack Nicklaus became the greatest golfer of all time, and everyone starting all the way back in the back. I think the first one was Gene Sarazen, and it went all the way through to Byron, Arnold, Jack, Gary, Judy Rankin, all of those who you would want to emulate as a person as well as a golfer.
You know, Dave, your exposure to some of the iconic names in golf is mind-boggling the more I hear you talking. But, you know, when you start mentioning Jim McKay and Jack Whitaker, I mean, these people are just from the TV world. I mean, I remember watching Jack Whitaker doing the Triple Crown with Secretariat. You know, we got the Belmont Stakes this weekend coming up at Saratoga. But Frank, Darby, and myself, we always talk about mentors. And I came across an article that, and I kind of felt for you because I'm really not a podcaster. I never really did something. We decided to do this. We have the knowledge. And the first couple of shows, you know, I'm replaying them and I'm stumbling my words and not as confident as I should be. And I came across that article with Jimmy Roberts talking to you in 2002 at Bethpage Black, where you felt you were not doing a good job at all, you know, with the Champions Tour. Tell us what Jimmy Roberts meant to you and how much time did you put into your craft in those early years?
As much as was needed, because maybe I was not going to be naturally as good as others on the air, but no one's going to outwork me. I'm going to make sure that I know what I need to know and can find little tidbits that, frankly, I'm not a journalist at NBC and Golf Channel. Often they wanted to pat themselves on the back as journalists. I'm a promoter of the game of golf. I love the game, and I want to tribute those and celebrate those who are doing it the right way my dad taught me was the right way. Early on, first of all, when you have a name associated with someone whose, I guess, imprint or shadow in the game is far bigger than yours, there's always that imposter syndrome going on. And I've always had it, still have it. But I'm going to be the best David Marr III I can be. And I think my dad will be proud of it, my grandfather as well. And I'll do as well as I can do myself. I'm totally satisfied with that. But in 2002, as I'm trying to figure out my way, again, listening to a great pal of mine, Tony Tortorisi, hired me at Golf Channel. He was the executive producer at the time, to come in and see if my golf knowledge and history and contacts could help the channel. It was still early in the days of Golf Channel, but they had these weekday mornings and through the weekend as well of updates where I would be on from 8 till noon. And in the middle of a commercial break, I'd just throw in a 30-second update because they hadn't sold all their commercials. Sometimes they hadn't sold any, so I go for 2 minutes. So I would just update, here's what's going on around the world of golf, maybe a little soundbite here and there, get some repetition and get maybe some ease with broadcasting. Then they put me on a more difficult show. I didn't have much interaction with anybody else on the team because I was finished just as they were all coming in, getting ready for Golf Central in the evening. Kelly Tillman was the one person who understood. There was that guy who comes in the morning and he's gone by the time everybody else gets in, but he knows a thing or two, and maybe he's a decent kid. Let me talk to him and figure out what he's like. And she and I formed a very important friendship early on. But Jimmy had been one in those days when I was making $25 a day. Actually, I think I might have been promoted to 35 working for Jimmy. He was a PA at ABC. And I'm not sure exactly whether it's production assistant, production associate, what it actually means, but there are other words you can put in there. You are the bottom of the rung. You're the whipping boy for anything that goes wrong, and you're just there to be vented on. So as he's trying to do his job, being vented on by everyone who the egos in television production and not radio production as much, egos are runaway crazy egos. But as they're all venting, because none of them could make a mistake on Jimmy Roberts, who's doing a great job, he's getting beaten down, but he's also hearing it from the main announcer's kid who's out there, being babysat by Jimmy Roberts. Jimmy did a great job teaching me from a production side what to do. So when I got hired by ABC, I was in good shape. He went on to be in front of the camera with ESPN for a long time, and we sort of lost contact. We had some pals, and some of the old stories still sort of were there, but we didn't see each other very often. When we did, it was like no time had passed. And then when I started working at Golf Channel, and Jimmy was still up I guess he was at NBC in 2002, deep in the imposter syndrome, went to Bethpage, and I'm there and thinking to myself, I'm at a U.S. Open broadcasting in the U.S. Dad used to do that. Jack Whitaker, Jim McKay, Peter Alice used to, as I worked as a PA at ABC for all these guys. I know I'm doing it on a smaller scale, but this is our national championship. Who do I think I am that I have the opportunity to do this? And Jimmy sat me down, and he said, for the first 2 years at ESPN, every day I came into work, I was waiting to get fired. I was sure they were going to fire me because I didn't know what I was doing. But I worked as hard as I could and made sure that I would end up doing the best I could do. Might not be as good as others who were in the position were doing, and maybe I'll get fired because of that, because there's somebody better coming along, but it's not because I'm not trying. And after about 2 years, and this was right about my 2-year point with Golf Channel, I ended up sort of taking his advice, and I said, let me just give it a little more time. I was going to become a real estate agent on the East End of Long Island. That was my next move. I was really getting my ducks in a row for that, going back to school and getting my counselor's license to become a personal counselor. And I said, let me give it a little more time. And all of a sudden, it just started to be familiar. He said after 2 years, it just clicked in for him. After talking to him, I remember going some point at Bethpage and listening to someone say, as I walked through the ropes, hey, there's Dave Marr with the Golf Channel, and close the ropes behind me. And I had always walked behind my dad a few steps to try and hear what people were saying about him. They didn't know who I was, but I would hear, and they were always saying very nice, pleasant things about him. And the person said, hey, there's David Marr with the Golf Channel. And the guy next to him said, yeah, I like what he does. And so I'm getting a little emotional about it right now because that was the moment that I remember at the time where I said, wow, maybe I'm not as bad as I thought I was. And maybe some of the stories that my dad and all those others, Dan Jenkins, Arnold, Jack, Gary, everybody else and my pals now, whether it's, O'Meara, Langer, all those guys, bless me with the knowledge of what they had to go through and all that they've lived. Maybe I can take those stories and give some appreciation to other people and have them love their game in a way like my dad, my grandfather did. And that day with Jimmy saying, hang in for a little bit more, and a random person out of the corner of my ear hearing it walking through Bethpage Black, which is 30 miles from where I was raised on the east side of New York City, upper side, east side of Manhattan. It was a moment where I realized, hey, maybe I can add to this game. Not like my dad did, but just like I could.
Brian and I talk an awful lot about mentors, and I think that's one of the things these days we're missing mentors. There's not, I grew up. My dad was my main mentor, of course, but Lee Milligan, who was the golf professional I worked for, was a big time mentor. Brian Kroll has done an unbelievable job with me, just not fumbling too bad on our SiriusXM show. And I can tell you this, Dave Marr has always been on my list as well. I've never publicly said it, but who wouldn't want Dave Marr as a mentor as well? And you know what? Dave Marr's a link to the past. I'm not saying anything about age, but I'm an old school guy. I'm older than Dave, and all the people that Dave is talking about that he grew up with. I was fortunate to work for somebody named Joe Ennis at North Hills, who was great friends with Nunzio Campi and Dave. You know all the old names. So I didn't hang out with kids my own age as I was growing up as an assistant pro. I hung out with Mike Fetchick and the Joyce brothers and everything else. So I think that really kind of, helped me at least have a passion for this game of golf similar to what Dave has.
Dave, a sponsor is the Tunnel to Towers. And I know you know that organization well, being from New York. But we want to send you these beautiful leather-wrapped glasses for being our guest today. We'll get your address and we'll get this in the mail to you, and maybe you can enjoy a drink after the USA team wins the Ryder Cup. For our audience, you could listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, X, Instagram, Facebook, and also LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, love, share, repost. We'd really, really appreciate that. Don't forget the Tunnel to Towers website is T2T.org, and you can make as little as an $11 donation to assist our American heroes. Dave, before we let you go, I just had one other question, and maybe Dobbs has one too, is A, are you going to the Ryder Cup? And B, have you ever covered a Ryder Cup?
Yes to both. My understanding is I'll be on the team at SiriusXM. But let me just first say, as a young boy growing up on the crosstown bus, going from the Upper East Side to collegiate school, where I went to high school and grade school, I watched the towers being put up, being constructed, and Tunnel to Towers is, from my perspective, one of the great charities, philanthropies there is, and I appreciate you letting me be a part of that. It's, for anyone out there who wants to be a part of something special, that is extra special. And I really appreciate you having me be on your podcast, especially as the Ryder Cup approaches. But I'll be there in September at Bethpage, and I've covered a few, often with Golf Channel, going there and getting a sense for what's going on early in the week. I covered the 1983 Ryder Cup at PGA National for ABC as a PA when I was hired by them after school. 83 was, I'm getting them all mixed up. 83 in Florida. 87, I was at Jack's at Muirfield Village, where we lost on the home field for the first time in ever. And I've been to everyone since then except Kiowa Island. So I've been to all of them, and it's never, ever, ever a disappointment.
Cool. Hey, listen, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Hey, that was a great interview. And, like I said, I love Dave Marr. I look forward to every Sunday and interacting with him on both our shows as well. So, Dave, thanks for coming on the road to the Ryder Cup.
Privilege, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Dave, before we, just for our audience, so you have the scorecard, which is on what, Saturday, Sunday, SiriusXM PGA Tour Radio?
Typically Saturday, Sunday, typically 11 to 1, just the 2 hours prior to our live coverage. Sometimes there's a tournament that goes earlier, so it might bounce my show out, or it might be a major championship that they have their hours changed then. And then PGA of America Radio, typically 10 a.m. on Saturdays.
Awesome. Tune into that. As you can see, Dave is just a wealth of knowledge, and we do appreciate all your time and effort, and we hope to see you at the Ryder Cup at Bethpage.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jeff.